Okay, hi everyone. I'm out walking my dog this morning and I'm on day 25 of feeling pretty much 100% better, maybe 95% better, which is really cool. And you know, I had a lot of people asking me how, and I PM'd them back about how I feel better. And I was a little bit reluctant to post the full story just in case anybody thought I was giving medical advice, which I'm not. This is my personal story. I caught COVID back in March 2020, so I'm an original strain girl. And I was ill for 2 weeks. It was very bad. I was pretty close to calling the ambulance a few times because I couldn't breathe. Not very well anyway, but I have asthma, so I'm kind of used to it. I had a pump, I got through it. And then after 2 weeks of that, I thought, well, I'm feeling better, should be okay. About a month later, still not better. Really tired, pain all over my body, inflammation, itching skin, dodgy eyesight, lots more symptoms, but you get the idea. Long COVID. Of course, those are the days before they even knew it was long COVID, or doctors even accepted it. I think it was like nearly 9 months after I got sick that they finally added it to the NICE guidelines for something that a doctor could refer or treat. Not that they can treat it at the moment. Not even the long COVID clinics really understand how to resolve it. They just send you videos. So again, not medical advice, just my story. So I went through the usual stuff. I went to the doctor. The doctor said there's no such thing as long COVID, which is what she actually meant was I don't have long COVID as a condition that I can diagnose. But she didn't tell me that. It just felt incredibly invalidating, which is something that we're all very familiar with. And she referred me to a rheumatologist. That appointment took 6 months to come through. All the while, I'm still very sick and falling into debt. Lovely. Nothing like debt to make you calm and happy, right? I gave her a sheet of paper with all my symptoms, just in case I had brain fog on the day, which I did. I was very glad of that. And she just examined me and said, okay, yeah, you have a little fibromyalgia, because that's what I was referred for. But to be honest, this looks more like long COVID. So she sent me back to my doctor, and I asked her to write a letter to the doctor because, I was basically being told to go back to a doctor to ask a referral for something that she basically said didn't exist. So she did that for me. I was really pleased she did that. She wrote it out. So I went back to the doctor. They referred me to the long COVID clinic, and probably nearly a year and 3 months has passed by this point, I'm guessing. I haven't written it all down. And I get a phone call, I get assessed. Months later, they finally accept me into the system. And their treatment was basically sending a whole load of videos to me. I never saw it in person. I never had any in-person treatment at the long COVID clinic, which is very upsetting and invalidating and worrying. And they didn't really help me. And then one day I suddenly thought to myself, geez, they're not going to help. What am I supposed to do? And after a couple of days of that pity party, it was bad. I was very sad, very depressed. I decided the best thing I could do was to help myself. And I resolved on good days when I didn't have brain fog to start really researching anything that I could find on long COVID. At the time, there really wasn't much. So I looked into other conditions that had similar symptoms, and I found chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, basically anything that was a syndrome. I started to research. Okay, so that was the first step. First step was realizing that no one was going to help me, and deciding to do something about it myself. And it's a hard thing to accept. But once I did that, I went into research mode, and you know, I used to work for a medical devices company, so I, you know, did a lot of work on physiology and biology and some clinical studies and everything. So it was easy enough for me to read all the clinical studies and work back from there. So the first thing I did is I started to look at my symptoms and what they were. So my major symptoms were fatigue, pain, blurry eyesight, and really itchy skin. And that itchy skin was so annoying that I decided to deal with that one first. Now, the great thing about that as well is it's very telling. Itching is something that tends to be caused by something called histamine in your body. And that's why when you take antihistamines, the reaction that you get to an allergen calms down. So histamine, as you can say, can be known as an allergic response to something. So I was allergic to something, or intolerant to something, and there's a really big difference, obviously, between the two. So when I looked into that, I thought, well, okay, so is it worse doing one time of the year than the other? No. Okay, so it's not environmental, or at least if it is environmental, it's something that I'm exposed to all the time. Is it worse some days than others? Yes. Okay. Is that variation correlating with anything? No, I don't think so. And then I thought, okay, so I do eat different things every day, so it might be my food. So I dove then into research on how to work out what your intolerances are without spending hundreds of pounds on allergy tests and things like that. And the strategy that I came up with was very simple. I went on a fast. Now, we're going to stop here and put in a really big flag. This is something that you should only do under the advice of a medical practitioner. I got to be honest, I didn't consult my doctor, but then I don't have type 2 diabetes. I don't have I didn't have any kind of digestive disorder apart from the things that had happened since long COVID. And they had a really good look at me. There was nothing in my bloods. I'd had lots of blood tests, including sugar and things like that. So I was pretty confident that I was okay doing it. But, you know, if you have something that a fast might contradict with, then you really need to talk to the doctor before you do this. Right, disclaimer in. I basically did a 3-day fast where I only drank water. So I remained hydrated, but I didn't eat any food at all. That was really hard. Oh, I was hungry. Well, actually, I was hungry for the first day and a half, and then by day 3, I was kind of all right with it. But it did require some willpower, I've got to be honest. And then on day 3, I thought to myself, you know, what shall I do? How should I handle this? Should I just start eating again and see what happens? I thought, no, that doesn't make sense. So I thought, what I'll do is I will introduce foods back in a way that in a way where I can clearly see what's making me ill and what's not. And so instead of an elimination diet, which would show gradual results, I went for an introduction diet. So I introduced food in kind of one by one, or in groups if they were perceived to be safe foods. And we should say something about safe foods, actually. There's no such thing as a safe food. You know, there's a potential for somebody to be allergic to pretty much anything. But there are foods that are more likely to cause a reaction. Like, for example, tomatoes and peppers are part of the nightshade family. And they can be problematic for some people. Nuts, obviously. So if you are going to do this, I suggest you Google sort of common allergic type foods, and keep those in a list. And when you introduce these, only do them kind of later on, and on a day where you're eating all the safe foods that you've identified so far, and just that on top. So if you get a reaction to it, it's instant and noticeable, and you understand what's happening. So I started on day one, and I was eating carrot batons and apple slices, because I was pretty sure I was okay with apples, and that was fine, that was great. And then the next day I introduced potatoes and a little bit of rice, and that was absolutely fine. And then I started throwing more and more foods in, and before long I felt meat, for example, chicken, steak, things like that. I threw those in and everything was fine up until I added bread. And gluten, we know, is a common allergen. My stomach swelled out like I was 6 months pregnant again. All the pain came back in my body. So the inflammation and the pain and the swollen digestive tract was all around gluten. I went, oh, this is great. Okay, so all right, much as I regret never being able to visit the pastry shop again, and I will miss custard slices, I've cut out gluten, and I don't eat gluten. And there are a few other things as well. So I started basically eating in a way that I was only eating kind of natural foods. And then one day I got a little bit lazy, and I picked up some stuff from the supermarket that I thought was okay. It was like a microwave meal or something, and I was feeling really tired, and I thought, oh, I could just do with a microwave meal. And I ate that, and I got ill again. But I checked the ingredients, there was no gluten in it. And I started to realise how processed foods are actually really bad for you. I tested this over and over again because I really wanted processed foods for some reason. Can't quite work out now why. I don't miss them anymore. I couldn't eat processed foods, or some of processed food, and I'm going to do another separate video about processed food and how I worked out what I can and can't eat another time, because it's too much detail. You need the full story, and not to get completely bored with what I'm saying. So I worked that out. So no gluten, no processed food, and I continued to gradually get better, to the point where I was mowing the lawn again, which is amazing. And we all know, don't we? There are certain tasks around the house that are just way out of our reach. And for me, it was vacuuming, mowing the lawn, doing anything where you pick stuff up off the ground on a sort of repeatedly would make me incredibly dizzy and tired and sick. So gardening was out and tidying up was out. I ended up with a litter picker thing to pick up stuff off the ground. And then suddenly, with this new diet, I started to feel a lot better, which was great. But I was still super tired. And so I think it was about a year later I started to think, okay, so I've reduced my pain levels, which is wonderful. I've stopped the big fat swollen digestive tract part of things, which is great. And I've created a situation where I can manage a few household tasks, but not all of them. So yeah, right. So the next part, I'm going to take a pause now and finish my dog walk, and then I'll come back to you. Hang on. Okay, stage 3. So we've been through taking responsibility for your own health and wanting to change things. We've been through diet and clean eating. The next stage is to calm down your nervous system. So we've all been in situations in life when things have been really stressful. And before you say anything about doctors gaslighting you and saying it's all in your head and all the rest of it, that's not what I'm saying. Okay. having COVID and suffering from long COVID in itself is a really dysregulating thing. It's hard to go through the actual virus itself for many people. You know, even if you only had it at home, it's really scary because of everything that has been going on in the world, all those images that we saw on television. It's super scary. And a lot of us, I've noticed, actually do have did have existing problems with their mental health before. You know, some of us are very easily triggered. Some of us have unfortunately been subject to abuse at one level or another. And, you know, to go through something like COVID, after having previously been through something like that, is going to bring you right back to feeling powerless, not having any control in your life, being told to stay indoors for months on end, wearing masks, social anxiety. It's all really triggering to your nervous system. And look, you know, doctors aren't really acknowledging that the nervous system can play a role, but go ahead and Google it. Your nervous system is responsible for all automatic processes in your body. Your heartbeat, the production of waste products, the ability to create and modulate energy for any of you out there who've also got chronic fatigue. The rate at which you breathe is controlled by the nervous system. The movement of food from the point after you manually swallow it all the way from here down to the end point is all moved by little muscle movements that push food down through your pipes into your stomach and then through the incredibly long bowel system and right to the end. That is all autonomic nervous system stuff. And then you've got the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, which are responsible for fight or flight, you know, being scared. And then the second part is responsible for bringing you out of being scared. So your nervous system is actually really important, and I think we can all agree that we have been stressed at one point or another, whether that's due to external factors, you know, in our current situation, or whether it's stuff that's happened to us when we were much younger. So whilst I was looking into it, it became very clear that, you know, these automatic processes in my body just weren't working properly anymore. My breathing was dysregulated, my heart was banging out of my chest, I was falling over in supermarkets and having lots of real difficulty there, and this is all to do with the nervous system. So I thought to myself, you know, what should I do? I need to calm down my nervous system. I need to move from fight or flight into I'm calmer. And how did I do that? A couple of things. Actually, quite a lot of things. So I started off looking into what kind of exercises I could do, and the first ones I came up with were breathing. So you can actually force yourself out of fight or flight and back into rest and digest. Notice how they call it rest and digest. Food going through. I used to get food stuck here. I'd swallow it and then it would get stuck here and it would be completely blocked, and if I ate anything else it would just keep building up and I'd have to literally force it up. I wasn't throwing up the contents of my stomach, I was throwing up the contents of my tube. And if I didn't get rid of it, then I couldn't swallow my saliva, I had to spit it out. And that my worst attack lasted 48 hours, where I couldn't eat or drink anything while I was waiting for this thing to start back up again. It was pretty close to sending myself into hospital. So where was I? Yeah, so I'm working out ways to take myself from fight or flight into rest and digest. And the first one was box breathing, and I'll show you that one, and then you can do your own research as to what breathing exercises you can also try. So my favourite one is box breathing. So what you're doing is you're controlling your breath and making it long and even. So you breathe in to a count of 4, 3, 4, and then hold it for 4, and then breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and then do it again. And again, and again, and again. And because you're forcing your breathing to be normal, your body goes, oh, everything's fine. And it brings you down out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. So that was the first thing I tried, and I found that to be very, very helpful. I also got into the habit of noticing when my body was tense. So we've all been there, we've sat there and we've got our shoulders up like this, and we're so tense and worried, and you can actually just sit there, roll your shoulders around, let them relax out, and feel tension coming out of you. So I'll do another video and lots of different other ones that I found, because goodness me, there were so many. Some of them worked well for me, some didn't work as well. And the more you try, the more likely you are to find your favourite ones, the ones that really work for you. The next thing I tried, which didn't really work, was self-medicating with alcohol. Not so good. I mean, yeah, it gives you an evening off, for sure. I'm not knocking it. But it's also a depressant, we're all depressed enough already, aren't we? So that I didn't find so good. The third thing I found, which is my absolute favourite, but seriously, don't do this in isolation, because you need to learn the physical ways of bringing your body down, because you can't rely on this. This is a way of giving yourself an evening off or a day off without many side effects. I actually tried medical cannabis. I got a prescription, and I got the prescription privately. Not that expensive and infinitely safer than popping down to your local dealer and breaking the law. I tried bud and oil, and obviously I wasn't looking to get stoned off my face, I was looking to microdose. So you take very, very small amounts on a regular basis. Obviously you can't drive or anything like that, but to be fair, most of us aren't going out much anymore anyway. And I use that to bring myself out of this permanent state of fight or flight. Now, I don't need it as much anymore, and which is a fabulous place to be in, but it got me out of this permanent state of being scared and concerned about everything all of the time, long enough for me to start learning to recognise when my body was stressed and dysregulated. I also started really listening to my body, and this was a massive thing for me. I started to notice the somatic responses to stress and external input. So for me, I mean, I co-parent with my ex, which is quite challenging, and I have 2 autistic children who can become quite dysregulated themselves, which then of course dysregulates me. So it was really important for me to learn to notice when my body is stressed, to notice when my shoulders are up, my back is hurting, to notice headaches, heart palpitations, balance and dizzy spells, and then to correlate that with how I'm feeling. So I ask myself, okay, I'm really stressed today, what's going on? And then I sit down and I have a really good think about why I'm stressed. Is there anything I can do about it? If not, then I probably need to consider not worrying about it, because it's out of my control. There's nothing I can do about it for now. You know, is there a short-term plan for this? Is there a long-term plan for this? And before you know it, I started going from powerless to powerful, from out of control to in control. And as soon as I stopped burying my head in the sand in regards to what I was feeling, I started to feel more in control. Now, I know some of you might be saying, oh, there's stuff that's not under my control and everything. Yeah, absolutely, there's stuff that's not under my control either. But I choose myself whether I allow those things to upset me. And, you know, and I decide whether there's anything I can do about it, or whether the best thing to do is to just wait and see. I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but that is how I handle it. So, where was I? Right. So, despite all of these amazing changes, I definitely pushed myself back into rest and digest for most of the time, but I still had this underlying tide, this propensity to move back into fight or flight really, really easily. I was easily triggered, and I needed to deal with that. I needed to work out a more permanent solution for it. I was also still incredibly tired all the time. I had still had chronic fatigue, and I needed to find a way around that. And from what at that point, I still thought that the chronic fatigue wasn't to do with the nervous system, because I'd looked into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and neither of those two are responsible for your energy levels. But guess what? The autonomic system is responsible for your energy levels. Great. So when you put the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system into balance, your energy levels come back. How did I do that? That's next. Okay. So we've probably got up to something like the last 6 months now. This is sort of like, I'm 4 years in. I've healed my body. I've lost 4.5 stone in weight without even trying. It's just kind of come off because I've stopped eating junk, and that's great. It was lovely. It was a lot easier to walk around. I've worked out the physical symptoms that mean I'm in fight or flight, and I've worked out coping strategies to push myself back out of it, but I have not yet worked out my energy, and I haven't worked out a permanent way to extract myself from some falling into fight or flight far too often. I could only work out to get myself out once I was in. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I think it does. Okay. So about 6 months ago, I started training to be a coach. I already knew that there was a mental aspect to this, so it was a double investment, really. I was looking for a way to work, because that didn't involve a lot of hours and paid a decent amount per hour. I think we can all agree that that's a really good idea when you can only work part-time, is to raise your hourly rate, and do things that don't require a lot of intensive work. And I already knew that I was the kind of person who was really good at working out other people's problems and understanding what motivates people, because it's been an underlying thing on pretty much everything I've ever done. So I started training as a coach. I got one of those international qualifications that means something to someone, but what mattered to me was the content of the course. And I was doing my thing, and I started to really understand the human psyche. and what it is that motivates us and the things that scare us. And I started coaching other coaches in practice, and I started to notice how many of them had childhood trauma. And I thought, well, you know, and I noticed how that would fold into procrastination and perfectionism, how it would affect their relationships with other people, how it would cause them to fall into narcissistic relationships, how they would become codependent with other people. You know, there were some coaches there who genuinely thought they were incredibly empathetic, but actually they were only empathetic to other people's negative emotions because they'd grown up in an abusive home. So they'd become really vigilant to everything that was going on around them. So, you know, they could identify the danger signals of somebody being in a bad mood from 50 yards away, but they weren't so sensitive to things like joy and happiness. And because they were very sensitive to negative emotions, it kind of attracted that kind of vibe from other people as well, which was really hard on them, really hard. So I started working with them, and it was, you know, they were free coaching sessions designed to improve your coaching skills in a safe environment, because, you know, you were coaching a coach. It was fine, but everybody has issues. You know, even therapists go to therapy, and so there was plenty of ground for me to work. And so as those realizations came along, as I started to see the patterns with them and the patterns inside me, I started to work out what was going on, and I worked out why I had issues, and I worked out that I did in fact have some childhood trauma, and I definitely had trauma from my marriage, and I started to really think about those things, and I started to really process what was going on. But it didn't matter how much work I did, I couldn't quite work out what was going on until I came across the work of a Dr. Howard Schubiner, who is a real doctor in America, and he's currently pioneering work with people with chronic illnesses like chronic fatigue, long COVID, anything really that could be caused by a dysregulated nervous system. So, and I saw a film called This Might Hurt. It's not available on YouTube, unfortunately. They do charge for it. It's about 30 quid on their website to watch it, but I'll give you the crib on it. It's about an hour and a half long. It follows Dr. Schubiner bringing in a group of patients in a group therapy environment. They've all got a variety of illnesses, and they all have one thing in common: trauma. And he brought them in, he explained pretty much a lot of the things that I've talked about, and he sent them off into coaching sessions, coaching each other, talking through their feelings about stuff that's happened to them. And he helped them reprocess those feelings in a constructive way, but also to voice them. More than anything else, we all stuff down our feelings in a terrible way, and you follow these people, you see them in their homes, you see them, you know, there's one kid who's still living with his parents, the rest of them were adults. Of the, say, 15 people that he took on, 13 of them came out with lasting results, getting their lives back. One of them walked out on the first day because they weren't willing to believe that their mind could control their body. And the other one was a teenager, and he didn't really have control over his environment. So I would say that, you know, maybe his healing will come later. It's a shame, but 13 out of 15, wow. You know, if I heard of a doctor who could heal people from chronic illness, and have that kind of success rate, I would be knocking on his door if I could fly to America. So I downloaded and paid for his course on helping people to get through trauma and not in, so that I could treat myself with it. And I did that. That's when I realised that although I was feeling my feelings, I wasn't actually feeling the right ones. I had decades of anger inside of me. Decades, literally decades. Anger from the childhood trauma, anger from the way that certain people have treated me, in correction, the way I allowed certain people to treat me. Decades of pent-up frustration and anger. Sorry, just crossing the road. And I was expressing it as sadness. Just sadness. Not anger, sadness. And I suddenly realised, hang on, I was thinking about the situations that led up to all of the things that I was sad about, but to be honest, should be angry about. And I realised, oh, I think, if my friend was telling me about these things and she said she was sad, I'd be looking at her like she was insane. I'd be saying, sorry, I'd be looking at her like she was insane. I'd be saying, well, shouldn't you be angry? And it kind of, I suddenly just started to see it really, really clearly. So as soon as I realised that, I thought, right, okay, I will start reprocessing every single memory that I've got and asking myself if my emotion about that memory is true or not. Is it really what I should be feeling? Should I be sad? Should I be mad? Should I be disappointed? Should I be, discombobulated? Whatever. Every emotion that I had that was connected to something that I viewed to be traumatic, I reprocessed it. It took me, a couple of weeks. But the first thing I did before I did any of that is I went into my son's room. Nobody was home. I pushed his punch bag into the middle of the room and smashed the shit out of it. And all of the anger came out. And even though I still had chronic fatigue at that point, I had plenty of energy to do it. And it felt like I'd chuck up a champagne bottle, like one of those ones from the Grand Prix. I'm just going to get my dog out of her collar. It's like one of those big champagne bottles at the Grand Prix, and it was shook up and it was just spraying everywhere. I let it all out, every last bit of it. It was amazing. And then I sat down and I thought, I feel quite good actually. And I made my dinner and I started doing it the way I normally do, where I make a little bit and then I go sit down for a bit and then I make a little bit and I go sit down a bit. And I was thinking, actually, I don't think I actually need to sit down. I think I'm good. So I got up and I finished making the dinner. I sat down and I ate it. And then I took the plate back to the kitchen and I washed up. And I thought, I still feel good. Okay. I still feel good. And this carried on. And I was just thinking, I feel good. What's going on? This is amazing. And so what really happened for me was that I wasn't processing my emotions correctly. I was feeling emotional, yeah, but not the right emotion. I was sad when I should have been really, really mad. And then I let it go. And I took responsibility for what happened to me. In a rational way. I mean, I'm not going to take responsibility for the stuff that people did to me. No. But I'm going to express the anger and then I let it go. And then over the next few weeks, I reprocessed every single memory that I'd had of a traumatic event, and I questioned myself, should I be sad or mad? Should I be happy or nervous? Should, was my emotional response to that memory appropriate? Or was it inappropriate? Was I avoiding my feelings? Now, I can hear you asking, why on earth would I process my emotions wrong? And I'll tell you, it's all about your childhood and other experiences. Let's just say for a moment that you grew up in a household where if you express anger, you're shouted at. If you express sadness, you are shamed. Any kind of expression of your emotions is turned on its head and turned against you. You very quickly learn to shove it all down where the sun don't shine. I learnt not to express anger. And I reflect back on it, I don't lose my temper. I'm an incredibly calm person. And I was kind of proud of that. I was proud of how calm I am. But now I look back at it and I think, wow, that made me really ill. It's just ridiculous. So if you want to learn any more about how processing people pleasing, not processing your emotions, etc., then how the mind affects your body. There's a book called When the Body Says No, which is excellent. If you want to understand the nervous system and how the nervous system can affect your body, and you want to see people healing this way, you want to prove it to yourself, then This Might Hurt film is the way to go. You can Google that. If you want to see a whole load of stories on a video because you can't read, then there's a lady on YouTube, Canadian lady, brown hair, called Reagan Agel, and she had chronic fatigue for 10 years and eventually healed herself using mind-body techniques, and now she just interviews people on YouTube, trying to get the message across and really trying to help as many people as possible. She's a delightful listen, and she's always very honest and straightforward, but caring, and you can hear it in a non-triggering way, which is great. So that's it really. There's a lot more to it, and I am going to be posting a lot of videos about the smaller parts of everything that I've talked about. I've given you the top level summary. There's lots, and some of my personal stories and reflections on the service that we haven't been provided. All sorts of stuff we're going to be talking about, so I'm going to do that on my Facebook profile, and also at some point, but not yet, my YouTube channel, which is Long COVID Warrior, and you can, if you subscribe to that, then you'll see them pop up eventually. This one's probably going to end up on there as well. So yeah, look, I apologise if anything that I've said doesn't chime with your experience. I'm telling my own story. Please don't take it as anything other than that. And I'm trying to be helpful, because as soon as I got a handle on the mind-body connection, I cracked it, and I'm doing really well. And so, take this in with the intent that it was given. I'm trying to help, and I wish you, I hope you all recover, every single one of you. Nobody deserves to be ill the way that we have been. Nobody does, especially not people who've previously experienced abuse. It's just, it's just horrific. And then to be faced with a medical system that can't help us, even worse. So my message is you can fix it, but you need to do it. Don't wait for somebody else to save you. You are strong. You're likely a survivor of abuse, in one way or another, or at least neglect, or a difficult childhood in one way or another, or you're a survivor of a narcissistic relationship.
You know, you are probably somebody who goes out of their way to do as much as you can for other people, or at least you did before you got ill. These are all, you know, markers of people who will end up with chronic illness at the end of the day. But you've got that way because you are strong, and you can be strong again. You can, but you need to decide that you're ready to do so. You need to make massive changes in your life. No more people pleasing. No more running around putting everybody else before you. Self-care and chasing joy is your way home. Okay, much love.